Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. We got to talk about this BJ Whitmer situation that is not looking very good for AEW, as the victim of BJ Whitmer wrote on her GoFundMe page a detailed, nay, a chronicle of what actually occurred between her and AEW, expressing that there was some sort of inhumane, unfeeling treatment by AEW legal, which would include Mega Perek and Chris Peck. So let's catch everybody up, because not a lot of people know this. BJ Whitmer was arrested in June of 2023 for domestic violence. So this is from F4W Online. It says AEW has fired producer BJ Whitmer after his early June arrest on domestic violence charges. Fightful reported Monday night that the 45-year-old was arrested on Sunday, June 4th by the Boone County, Kentucky Sheriff's Department on charges of first-degree strangulation and second-degree burglary. Shortly after the report, AEW released the following statement saying, quote, BJ Whitmer has been terminated following his arrest on domestic violence charges. While talent and staff are ultimately responsible for their own personal actions, this behavior is intolerable within AEW. AEW has reached out to offer support to those impacted by this behavior. So, AEW was planning to reach out to the victim of BJ Whitmer. So, what happened with all this, before we get to what the young lady said in the question of this issue? In March of 2024, BJ Whitmer received probation and house arrest on these charges. So it says, this is also from F4W Online, I'm sorry. Whitmer was arrested on June 4th and charged with second-degree burglary and first-degree strangulation. He is alleged to have entered a former girlfriend's home, waited for her to return, and then assaulted her. From the police report, it says Mr. Whitmer grabbed her by the throat and threw her down on the couch, where he began strangling her. She began fighting for her life during the assault. Whitmer took on an Alford plea, meaning he acknowledges there is enough evidence to convict him, but he still maintains his innocence. It also means he can have the felony expunged from his record after 5 years. He has been sentenced to 5 years probation and 120 days of house arrest. So since this was in June, that 120 days is probably up by now. So he's probably not on house arrest, but he's still on probation. So it says, notice of his sentence was sent to journalist BJ Bethel, which of course we already read. So now we get to December. The young lady in question, whose name I'm not going to use, she started a GoFundMe page. And on that GoFundMe page, this is the opening paragraph. And I quote, with a heavy and humbled heart, this plea of help comes from a now homeless mother of 3 as a result of careless, egotistical, and inhumane actions of AEW and Chris Peck, a member of AEW's inside legal counsel. I will do my best to explain the pure catastrophic destruction Chris Peck's behavior has had on my life since September 2023. I pray that anyone reading this will do so with compassion and an open mind, as this journey that has started out positively has been anything but fair or kind. I pray for your empathy and grace as I explain my family's desperate needs to heal from and survive this horrible experience. So I am not going to go through the entire thing because she's asking for money from a GoFundMe because she needs shelter and transportation for her kids and all this sort of stuff, and all that's not relevant. Okay, this is about BJ Whitmer and AEW. I will hopefully remember to post a link of the GoFundMe in the description. So she says, quote, to provide some background, you may be familiar with the June 2023 criminal case against BJ Whitmer, former ROH wrestler and talent coach producer for AEW, for first-degree strangulation and second-degree burglary. What people do not know is that the direct impact that Chris Peck single-handedly had on the outcome of the criminal case against my abuser. his sentencing, and my ability to properly recover financially, mentally, and physically. Then he says, the trauma and hell of such a cruel and sinister experience is unspeakable. It is an evil that no person can prepare themselves for. I was brutally assaulted and then robbed of my chance of justice when Chris Peck breached the terms of the very NDA he forced me to sign at one of my most desperate moments. Let's pause right here. So what we learned from this is that she signed an NDA, that she would not talk about this case. She will then proceed to talk about this case, but she claims that Chris Peck broke the NDA first. So she continues by saying, without being subpoenaed or having any legal obligation whatsoever, and despite the date, time, stamp documentation of my every interaction with AEW, Chris Peck wrongfully provided an inaccurate description of my intentions and false context of my engagements with AEW, and then in parentheses it says Mega Perec, dating back to June 2023. So, despite documentation, she says Chris Peck is fabricating information and fabricating descriptions. She says Chris Peck blatantly lied to the defense attorney and the prosecuting team. AEW has been made aware of Peck's actions, the impact his actions have had on the outcome of my case, and the devastating effect it had on my life since March 2024. So, March 2024 is when they did the sentencing. He got probation and house arrest. She says AEW has had ample opportunity and time to address and take responsibility for Peck's actions, yet they have done nothing, putting me in the most vulnerable position imaginable. My intentions were never to jeopardize or harm AEW. My initial outreach to AEW was to inform them that BJ had been arrested and he was in jail. My first outreach was to AEW was to Mega Perec. I had known from BJ she had experience in mental health and crisis management, and BJ mentioned she helped him many times. Then she continues by saying, I made it clear to Mega Perec that reaching out to AEW was my last resort. Local law enforcement hadn't responded to prior events of abuse. I had nowhere else to turn, so I emailed Mega on June 10th, 2023. So this was 6 days after he was arrested. When Mega was my primary contact, I told her, and she seemed to understand, that I simply wanted policy change and a committed plan to address domestic violence in the wrestling industry in an effort to prevent further abuse. Not only was I failed by AEW after the glimmer of hope they provided after my initial outreach, and throughout the summer of 2023, I was failed by a broken, lazy legal system, and I am being failed by a billion-dollar company who knows of their errors and has watched a mother of three lose everything. So she goes into all of the things that her and her family has lost. But this is the second time this month that Mega Perec and Chris Peck have been accused of mishandling a case, of hearing a complaint, and instead of dealing with it, instead shoving NDAs in people's faces and asking them to sign them. This is not good. So she's going to give an overview of what occurred. She says, June 2023, attacked by BJ Whitmer on June 4th, after he broke into my home, waited for me to return, and strangled me after I refused to delete messages from him on my phone. He said the abuser was arrested for first-degree strangulation and second-degree burglary. The officer who arrested him is the only person in law enforcement who really seemed to care about my situation, and I am grateful to him to this day. An EPO was filed, granted by a judge with no contest by defendant. Criminal charges filed. Contacted AEW's then chief legal officer, Mega Perec. She says she has date, time, stamped calls, emails, and text messages. She informed Mega of the arrest, background of domestic violence abuse, and illegal drug use throughout his AEW employment on Sunday, June 11th. So, BJ Whitmer was using drugs and engaging in domestic violence while he was working in AEW. Now, he was, of course, fired once this stuff came to light. I'm not sure what more this young lady wanted AEW to do. I know she said she wanted some policy changes and all this sorts of stuff. But if they acted immediately and fired the guy within a few days of them finding out, I think they did everything they could do, but it's still not going to look good for them because there's always more that they could have done according to your standard of perfect. But they fired the guy. He was fired within days of actually getting arrested. So it's not like they ignored her pleas, Now, I'm just talking about in terms of how they handled BJ Whitmer. Okay, he was indeed fired. She continued by saying, provided adequate and supplementary evidence of all accusations and statements. Mega listened and asked me to send over any information I had to support what I was saying. We spoke for about an hour. I told her I had been hesitant to reach out, but reaching out to AEW was my last plea that BJ be held accountable in some way for his behavior. Mega swiftly took action after reviewing the information I provided overnight, and AEW terminated BJ's employment the morning of his arraignment. He has not told anyone at AEW he had been arrested and jailed since June 4th. So, it wasn't until the girl called AEW that they knew BJ Whitmer had even been arrested. He tried to keep it under wraps because he wanted to keep his job, clearly. So she kind of ratted him out and he got fired after proving that she could prove that all these things had occurred. So far, so good, right? I can't even say AEW has done anything wrong yet. You get a phone call saying the guy's in jail for beating somebody up. The guy is in jail. He did not call you and tell you. Again, this had been days after the fact. She said she talked to Meg on June 11th. The guy had been in jail a week already. So, yeah, it seems to make sense so far. So BJ Whitmer has been fired. So she says from June to September, she said based off the evidence and findings, Mega extended and offered the following support options. Domestic violence, trauma therapy resources, a home security team for my children and my safety after abuser was released on bail, security detail to EPO court hearing where abuser was present to ensure I was not alone, a detailed itemized financial support for specialized therapy and basic living expenses that could not be met due to severe medical conditions following the attack. So she claimed to have PTSD, anxiety, depression, etc. So Mega is doing a good job so far. It's kind of above and beyond. She's reaching out. She's listening. She's offering services. I'm assuming AEW is paying for these services. How did all of this stuff go wrong? So she continues by saying that September to October 2023 says, in late September, I received an email from Chris Peck stating that he was responding to my last email to Mega and that she would no longer be involved. Peck stated that he would be my direct contact going forward and that he would give me a call after reviewing the notes provided to him. I received a call from Peck the next day. He sounded scattered and began the conversation by stating he was completely unaware of my situation and that he did not have any insight or record of anything previously discussed with Mega. So Chris Peck is saying that, well, Mega didn't tell me anything. He's just calling her and saying, I don't know anything. But there also is a claim that he has notes of some kind. So what was he looking at if Mega didn't tell him anything, right? She said, quote, he asked that I start from the beginning and explain what happened. Generally a natural and reasonable question when a transition of support occurs. She said, there is nothing natural or reasonable about that general question when you're asking a domestic violence victim to relive and explain the trauma that they barely survived. That's just dramatic. That's being very dramatic right there, but neither here nor there, right? It is even more unreasonable considering all the emails, text messages, and call notes were forwarded to Peck by Mega upon her shift away from AEW as she explained when we connected briefly in October. So Mega left AEW, of course, around this time, and Chris Peck took over. And Chris Peck himself said that he got some notes from Mega, and then he said she didn't tell him anything, and he wanted to hear the story from the young lady, the victim, right? So the victim knows that Chris Peck has all of this stuff, and he's still asking her for more information and to tell the story again, essentially. She continues by saying, in October, she apologized. The transition had not been more smooth, and explained that she had been communicating with Chris Peck and was surprised to hear how our conversations over the summer 2023 were being characterized. Peck was not compassionate and showed no empathy during that or the following exchanges. He said that in order for him to follow up on the conversations previously discussed with Mega, I would need to forward to him all the evidence of the documented abuse I had experienced over the prior 2 years. Another cold and invasive request, given the degree of abuse and the amount that was documented, and again, all of which had been provided to Peck by Mega. So, she apparently had been, this is not the first time she had been abused by BJ Whitmer, apparently. And she sent all this information to Mega. And then Mega gave this stuff to Chris Peck. But then Chris Peck says, I want you to send it to me now. You know, so I don't, maybe there's something there that I don't understand. But if you already have it, why are you asking for it again? You know, that's a good question. So we continuing. She says, quote, when speaking about an additional financial support payment to help with rent, Peck changed the tone of engagement entirely and asked what is needed to make, quote, this go away as a final amount for us to go our separate ways. Wow. What do I need to give you to make you go away? How much? What do I need to give you to make you go away? That's almost mafia-like, right? Maybe Mega should have negotiated the NDA, right? So she continues by saying, I was completely blindsided by his comments and approach, given my prior experiences with Mega. Until that moment, I did not feel that this, quote unquote, was me against AEW. Rather, I felt it was a supportive partnership on resource and a relationship that had progressed with a goal to create and drive positive change in a much needed way. Peck made it clear that none of that was going to happen. Wow. He just wanted this thing to be over. And I can understand it from his perspective. You know, this stuff is time consuming. He's a legal officer. He probably has a bunch of other stuff to do. The guy went to jail. He's out of jail now. He doesn't work here anymore. What more do you want us to do? You want money? That's why you keep calling us? How much? You know, what do you want? You know, I can see it from that perspective. It is harsh, but I also understand it. You know, as a professional, you really don't have time for this kind of stuff. You know, it's very lengthy. And if this stuff began in March and here it is October and they're still talking, the guy hasn't worked there for 4 months at this point, right? You know, he's already gone. We should be done. You know, like we almost never see these situations in like regular jobs where, you know, a guy who is a barista at Starbucks goes home, slaps his girlfriend, and now Starbucks has to have hour-long phone conversations with this woman, you know, every day or something like that. That just seems egregious. So I understand from his perspective that he's trying to end this. He's trying to stop this conversation. This is going too far. We got to stop this. But I also understand it from the young lady's perspective because Mega Perec had started all of this stuff. She had already got the wheels moving. That this was going to be an ongoing relationship. That there was no end to this. That, okay, you're going through all this trauma and all this stuff. Let's help you work through it. And then she passes the buck to somebody else who doesn't have that same sentimentality. He's like, clearly this is about money. What do you want? You know? That's That I can understand how that could be a sharp pivot and how that might piss her off. I'm talking about the victim now. So I get it. She continues by saying, my next conversation with Peck included outside legal counsel as a representation for AEW. Aside from the shift in tone, I was flat out bullied by the Latham attorney with accusations that I was attempting to threaten AEW with intentions for financial gain. So they have pivoted from this is a helpful, supportive organization to you're looking for money. What do you want? You know, and it seems to be the exact same thing that if you read the Ryan Namath complaint, the exact same thing. Mega Perek is, telling Ryan Namath, hey, all this stuff with CM Punk, it's okay. You're not going to get fired. We're willing to listen, blah, 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 blah. And then Chris Peck takes over and he's like, what do you want? You want money? How much do you want? Get out of my face. Clearly you want something and you're not going to turn down money. So what do you want? Let's get to the bottom of this thing, Mega soft shoeing it didn't seem to work. I hate to be laughing about the situation, but you can see how the differences in people are. Mega is trying to be supportive, at least from these people. They're telling you Mega is supportive. She's trying to do the right thing. But ultimately, if these people are just out for money, let's just get to the bottom of how much money do they want so that we won't have to deal with this stuff forever. Right? So, again, I understand it from both perspectives. She continues by saying, I was dumbfounded and offended by Latham's comments and made it clear that I would never attend another call with that attorney. Soon after, I received an email from Peck stating that I would need to sign an agreement in order to receive the financial support payment. I was entirely confused and had no idea how things went from an end of the spectrum to the other so quickly. Now, you may be asking yourself, why does she need money? Well, she said she couldn't work after, the mental stress of being attacked at her home. So now she doesn't have a job. So she does need money at this point. So she's talking about the NDA now. She says, while reviewing the NDA Peck provided and before signing, I reached out to Peck to verify that he was not in contact with Whitmer's defense attorney. Peck stated that Whitmer's attorney requested an itemized list of any form of financial assistance provided to me by AEW. I confirmed that this information was not subpoenaed or provided to prosecution for transparency and fair review. So, Chris Peck apparently was off the record requested for, are you giving this woman any money? By the defense attorney, being BJ Whitmer's attorney. And it didn't say that he provided it, but it says that basically they asked for it. And the prosecutor's office had not been made aware of that. And she says, I specifically requested that Peck inform me and the prosecution with any information provided to Whitmer's defense. She says, I provided contact information for the entire prosecution team and also requested for the prosecution to review the emails between Mega and myself, which provided full context and outlined needs, purpose for funds, as well as itemized allocation of funds. There was no attempt by the prosecution or the defense at any point to verify information provided by Peck or contact Mega Perek to fact check with the only person able to do so. So, all this stuff was forwarded to both parties, and neither one of them decided to call Mega and verify this is the stuff that they talked about. She said the NDA stated confidentiality for all parties, forbidding the sharing of any details of engagement between AEW and myself. The NDA states unless otherwise court-ordered or subpoenaed, neither party is to release the details of the engagement between AEW and myself, and that any information shared provided by either party without such court orders would be in breach of contract. After the agreement was fully executed, meaning she signed it, Peck engaged with Whitmer's defense attorney, stating that my intentions for my engagement with AEW was purely for financial gain. Once again, defense did not fact check or verify before forwarding Peck's statements to the prosecution. So, Chris Peck told the lawyer for BJ Whitmer, she's just out for money, bro. And that was it. He told the defense attorney that the victim was just out for money. That's why she's contacting AEW. And nobody sought to ask her what it was all about. And this was after she signed the NDA. So he's talking about her signing the NDA after she signed the NDA. What was the purpose of the NDA at that point, right? Continuing, Mega reached out to the prosecution and the defense in March 2024 at my request to clarify the nature of our conversations in the summer of 2023. Neither replied to her. She says, from the beginning, I was not looking for anything but empathy and someone to help me out of the most challenging situation I have ever been in. Mega lifted me up. Chris Peck painted me as a hysterical woman. The initial crime was painful enough. Peck made all my worst fears as a victim come true. And then she starts asking again for money for her family. What an absolutely devastating document here. Now, it doesn't go into a crazy amount of details. It doesn't, she doesn't dump all the information that she talked to Mega, what they talked about. But my goodness, this does not look good for Chris Peck, who is seemingly, I guess, helping BJ Whitmer. Was that the goal? Was to help BJ Whitmer by saying, she's just out for money? Because that didn't seem like it was in good faith to the victim in this case. And it does sound like something that is being said to help BJ Whitmer. That, she's just contacting us for money. Whether that was true or not, I think is irrelevant. I don't understand why Chris Peck was even having any conversations with the defense attorney, whether it was to help or harm BJ Whitmer. This should have been a situation in which AEW says, you don't work here anymore. We're hands off. We don't want anything to do with BJ Whitmer. We're not in the BJ Whitmer business anymore. Why should they care whether BJ Whitmer goes to jail or not? He doesn't work there anymore. I get it that, maybe you're frustrated with this woman and you're trying to figure out how much money does she want to go away. But why you're still in contact with BJ Whitmer is not something I can understand. I can't think of any legal reason why you need to still be in contact with BJ Whitmer. I just don't know. Even if the defense attorney was to ask you something, look, unless there was a subpoena, what's the point in having the conversation? Just say, look, anything you want, records or whatever, you're going to have to subpoena it. But it doesn't, and maybe that could have been helpful, if you feel like, he's being set up or something, or that the company is against him. But the company doesn't have to be for him or against him. The company can be hands off. The company can be like, look, we ain't got nothing to do with this. You're fired. Now, out of the goodness of our hearts, we'll help the children and the woman who was attacked by one of our employees. But we're not under any obligations to keep in contact with BJ Whitmer or this young lady. And I can understand that. If you worked at a grocery store and was abused, is the grocery store going to, sit and have these conversations forever? No, you think 4 or 5 months is long enough to have, to set her up with these resources. And if she has any other concerns, sure. But apparently that was what Mega Peck had done. She had already put her on the right track. She had given her the resources already. And apparently AEW was paying for this stuff. The rest of it, I don't know. It's a tough situation because I can see it from everybody's perspective. And I work in mental health. And yes, people who are, abused, they can be difficult to deal with. especially if they are alone in that situation, or they feel alone. I get it. At the same time, though, it's a GoFundMe page that she's writing on, and she wants to be as sympathetic as possible so that people will give her money. But that doesn't mean that anything she said was false, you know? But I can understand it from everybody's perspective. The woman didn't ask to be attacked. Why the hell would she want that? She wanted her abuser to be properly punished, but she feels like AEW, betrayed her and helped the guy. And that's why he only got, house arrest and probation. It's because AEW was willing to help him. And I'm not going to say she's wrong, because it sounds to me, if he reached out to the defense after she signed the NDA and told them she signed an NDA and that she was only looking for money, well, that would tell the prosecution and the defense that this whole thing is probably blown out of proportion. It was just about money. Now that the money's been paid, forget about it. Let's just drop it. Let BJ go on about his life. So he gets a light sentence for apparently attacking this woman and strangling her. That's fucked up, if that's what occurred. But this is just her side of the story. I'm assuming we're not going to get Chris Peck's side of the story because there's no benefit to him to talking about this. I doubt Tony Khan would ever talk about this. So the only story out there is going to be hers for the most part, unless something happens. And BJ Whitmer is not likely to say anything either, because he probably just wants this whole thing to blow over. And this young lady now has to deal with, having been attacked by BJ Whitmer and feeling at least betrayed by AEW Legal. That's pretty bad. And let me not end this video without saying fuck BJ Whitmer, because he pled guilty. He took an Alford plea, which is saying there's enough evidence that he could be convicted, but maintains his innocence. Fuck him nonetheless. If for nothing else, he's boring and a terrible professional wrestler, but he's also seemingly a pretty shitty guy. And whatever relationship he has with Chris Peck, hopefully that is going to be exposed at some point. Are they friends? Or is it just Chris Peck is just a prick? But we'll figure out eventually. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.